Hello. So in this video, I'm going to talk through my favorite political cartoons from the Cold War. I really think that some incredible cartoons were made during the Cold War, which really shed light on the political tensions and the key events of the Cold War and really help us understand what was going on at the time and make really interesting comments about the way that these were viewed around the world. So I'm going to give my favorite political cartoons, and I'm really interested if anybody else has got any suggestions of cartoons that I haven't included, things that you are interested in from the Cold War. Please let me know in the comments. So I'm going to do this in chronological order. Um, and the first one is this cartoon, which is about the Iron Curtain. And here we can see Winston Churchill peering under the Iron Curtain. This is made just after Winston Churchill's Iron Curtain speech in 1946. Um, and you can see in the top right hand corner of the image the hammer and sickle, the flag of the Soviet Union, and it says no admittance by order of Joe. Obviously, that's Joseph Stalin. You can see Europe has literally been split by the Iron Curtain there at this really kind of symbolic moment in the Cold War when Churchill makes this speech. And I think this cartoon is just a really effective way of portraying this. And you can see the way that the Soviet Union is portrayed here. Lots of kind of industry, and you can see a soldier along, or some soldiers along the Iron Curtain with weapons there as well. So moving on to the next one, we've got a cartoon made during the Berlin blockade and airlift, and this one is actually entitled The Bird Watcher. And you can see Stalin here looking at the storks, which are bringing food and coal. This is obviously representative of the Western Allies airlift that brought supplies into Berlin during the Berlin blockade that Stalin had imposed on Western Berlin. Obviously, Western Berlin was in Eastern Europe, and Stalin was trying to kind of strangle Berlin to take control of Berlin. And ultimately, he didn't succeed. The Berlin airlift succeeded, an absolutely incredible endeavor by the Western Allies, where planes were landing. I think it was about one every minute, something like that. They were landing the supplies in to keep West Berlin supplied with food and fuel, and everything needed for survival. And I think this cartoon is incredibly symbolic, and you could see Stalin kind of pondering whether to shoot them down or not. Obviously, that didn't happen. The planes weren't shot down during the Berlin airlift, but it's something you can really see the kind of tensions here, and the storks, very symbolic, bringing life. The next one is a cartoon about the arms race, making a comment on mutually assured destruction. So both sides have got these bombs, H bomb, Z bomb, Y rocket. So it's kind of making fun of the mutually assured destruction in the arms race. And both of them have these signs that say, on no account to be used because the enemy might retaliate. So this concept that they're kind of, it's almost like a bit of a proxy war. They're using bows and arrows, but they're not going to use these incredibly powerful weapons because that would mean the end of the world. And again, I think this really gives us an insight into the kind of attitudes and the understanding of mutually assured destruction at the time. I think it's a really, really useful cartoon to portray that. The next two cartoons are both about the Domino Theory, which is really central to American foreign policy from really the 50s onwards. I think Eisenhower references it in a speech in 1954. And as we can see here, the US is supporting, as it says here, Asian governments, Asian people, propping up independent nations as America saw it, supporting democracy around the world. Most famously, this was in Vietnam. So here we can see a soldier holding up the dominoes against the Viet Cong, who are trying to push Vietnam, to become communist. Then the idea is all of these other countries, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, etc., would fall to communism. So America is really supporting countries from falling to communism like a stack of dominoes. So these images are again really symbolic and help us kind of understand American foreign policy there. So the next few cartoons are about Cuba. The first one is about the Bay of Pigs, which was a kind of American foreign policy disaster, kind of attempted invasion of Cuba by Cuban exiles supported by the CIA. And here we can see JFK smoking a Cuban cigar. You can just see it says Cuba there, and it's blowing up in his face. So this is the idea that the events of Cuba have kind of blown up in Kennedy's face. Um, and it's a kind of disaster for Kennedy. Um, it's again a really kind of insightful, just showing that this was known to be a kind of foreign policy failure. Of course, the Bay of Pigs is followed shortly by the Cuban Missile Crisis, and here we can see Kennedy and Khrushchev arm wrestling, sitting on these H bombs, with their finger very close to the button. They're both looking kind of stressed and sweating. During the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis, when the world was incredibly close to nuclear war. I think this is a really, really good political cartoon at just highlighting the tensions, um, that were in place at the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis. The next one is about the outcome of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I think this is visually one of the most interesting cartoons. It's Khrushchev here, the leader of the USSR, taking the missiles from Cuba, literally pulling them out of Cuba, and Cuba here is represented as Fidel Castro. And the line above says, "This hurts me more than it hurts you." So Khrushchev is saying to Castro, this is something that's hurting me as well. And he's taking the missiles out of Cuba. Again, I think it's a really fascinating cartoon to see how this was portrayed at the time. This is obviously going to leave Castro kind of toothless and potentially vulnerable. Another outcome of the Cuban Missile Crisis was the kind of cooling down or the calming of tensions, and hostilities becoming less significant, with things like the hotline being set up between the Kremlin and the White House. And this cartoon really emphasizes that. An outcome of the Cuban Missile Crisis was that both Kennedy and Khrushchev wanted to work together a little bit more to stop nuclear war. And here we say, here we see Kennedy saying, let's get a lock for this thing, the monster of nuclear war, keeping it kind of closed. So they're going to work together. We've gone from this, where they're really on the edge of nuclear war, to this, where they're working together to stop nuclear war. They realize the world has come kind of perilously close to nuclear war. The next one, I think this might be my absolute favorite cartoon of them all. And this is about the Vietnam War, and it's about America's involvement in the Vietnam War. So this American GI here is Lyndon Johnson, who was the president in 1964, obviously became president after Kennedy's death in 63. And the ghost who's tapping Lyndon Johnson on the shoulder is representative of France, who had been defeated by Vietnam in Dien Bien Phu in 1954. So this is the ghost of France tapping America on the shoulder to warn them about the danger of going into Vietnam. And Johnson's turning around and saying, "Go away, I don't believe in ghosts." And if you think about what happens in the Vietnam War, this is really, it really does, give us kind of foresight into what happens. It's quite incredible that this cartoon was made in 1964, because, as we know, America gets bogged down in Vietnam, and ultimately, ends up leaving Vietnam, just the way, similar to the way that France did in 1954. So I think that's a really incredible cartoon, really foreshadowing what's going to happen. The last two cartoons are both about Vietnam too. This is a comment on Johnson's policy of escalation in the Vietnam War. So he's literally on an escalator. It's going up and increasing. The weaponry is increasing, and where is it going to end? So the suggestion at the top here is that it's going to end with, nuclear weapons being used. So a kind of disastrous kind of policy of escalation there. Finally, and the last cartoon I'm looking at is Nixon's policy on Vietnamization. So Nixon gets elected in 1968, comes to the presidency in 69, and this is a comment on his suggestion that he knows the answer. He knows how to end the Vietnam War, and it says, "I can see a light at the end of the tunnel," and he's in this maze. So it's obviously not as straightforward as he says it's going to be. Um, so I hope that that was an interesting video for you. I really think that the political cartoons of the Vietnam War are the pinnacle of political cartoons. I'd be really interested to hear what other people have to say. And if you, as I said before, if you've got any suggestions, any cartoons that I haven't included here, if you put a link to them in the comments, I'm really interested in finding out more and seeing others. Obviously, there are other cartoons that I haven't included. I just wanted to include my favorite ones here and the ones that I think are most kind of illustrative of some of the key events of the Vietnam War. But please go ahead and leave comments and let me know about any others that I haven't included. Thanks so much for watching.